welcome to Amphlett Reviews. I'm back with a Hong Kong content review, continuing on the Wong Kar-Wai experience and coming to conclusion almost now for the brilliant World of Wong Kar-Wai Criterion Box Set Edition. We're at number 8 now, and we're talking about 2046. And I just want to say this is an absolutely brilliant box set. I haven't mentioned this already on these reviews I've been doing. Glorious edition, absolutely worth every penny if you want to see some brilliant art house cinema, Hong Kong movies, expression movies, kind of thing, artistic movies that offer different types of characters and storylines and kind of themes are spread across kind of Wong Kar-Wai's kind of like, viewing kind of experience all the way from the 80s leading all the way to the early 2000s. And we're at a point now where this is 2004 now, we're at this point, and he did 2046 and a short film called The Hand, which is available also on this edition, which is fantastic, which I will dive into that into a separate video for. He did not do another film now after this until many years later. We're doing his first American film called My Blueberry Nights, and then doing The Grand Master back in 2013. In between that, he was doing a few shorts here and there, a few kind of BMW kind of advertisements, did a few collaborations with a few French companies and American companies. So this was kind of his kind of send-off in a sense, 2 years of making movies in a sense, you know, very close to. This was his kind of conclusion to his reign of movies, and this is almost like, I would say, his magnum opus, closing chapter to his kind of Wong Kar-Wai cinematic universe, multiverse, whatever you want to call it. 2046 is a very impressive film, and it really kind of shows a closing chapter and a point of his life, and a closing chapter in his kind of storytelling. And the films after this point were not quite the same compared to this level, and it's almost a goodbye to that style of filmmaking for a very, very long time. And it's very impressive. I've got a lot to say, and I think this is going to be a very interesting conversation for sure. So let's dive into 2046. '46 released in 2004, directed by Wong Kar-Wai, and as mentioned to and alluded to in my intro, this is a very definitive closing chapter to a portion of Wong Kar-Wai's movies up to this point. I refer to this as a kind of like almost like the cinematic universe or multiverse, whatever you want to say. This is closing off not only In the Mood for Love, because in fact this is an actual sequel to In the Mood for Love, or a kind of a shadow of a sequel of In the Mood for Love. Not a traditional type of sequel, it's a very different type of film, and you don't necessarily need to watch In the Mood for Love to get this film, but it does conclude aspects of the character that we left behind from In the Mood for Love, and even brings back a character from Days of Being Wild that was left hanging from the ending of that movie as well. So definitely resolves a few aspects. It also references Chungking Express, it also references Fallen Angels, and it's almost like a definitive conclusion to his kind of bittersweet romantic kind of interest and intrigue into the world of 1960s kind of Hong Kong, human expression, emotions, relationships, the falls, the highs, and diving into this world of these characters. And we get to see that for one last time through this aspect and this reign of kind of movies, and it feels very appropriate. It feels definitely his most ambitious, most riskiest. I mentioned before that Ashes of Time felt a bit too self-indulgent, and it kind of didn't feel, it felt misguided a little bit, and you can tell that from the film because it's a beautiful looking movie, but there's nothing impactful, there's nothing to really get behind in that movie. I mean, it's got some good sub-stories, but every time you get kind of invested, he kind of stops and starts. And this film, almost like he's learned a lesson a little bit from that, and he's taken what he's enjoyed about the last couple of years of making Happy Together, In the Mood for Love, and put it all in this movie, and even go and boldly try and say this is close to his Stanley Kubrick 2001 Space Odyssey you're going to get, and that's not even with the obvious kind of sci-fi elements to the film. But what I mean by that is that this feels like such a departure from his usual type of setup, and yet it still is very Wong Kar-Wai. You're probably wondering, Andrew, why would you say that? Close to Stanley Kubrick? Wow, this must be a good film. It is a great film. It's a brilliant film. I absolutely personally love it. It's not going to be for everyone. I don't think it's going to please everyone. I don't think this one is even highly regarded in Wong Kar-Wai's kind of, filmography compared to some of the others. But I do think this is one of his best movies, if not his best. And I would even say this is better than In the Mood for Love, and that's a bold statement yet again. Each film is very different. Obviously, it's going to approach you in a very different way, and I think that's one of the beautiful things about art house cinema, about Hong Kong movies and character journeys. And as someone who enjoys kind of rich characters and rich stories and emotional kind of punches in movies, and obviously some intrigue as the film goes along, each film is impacting me very different. In fact, this is an actual sequel with the character, Tony Leung's character, coming back, playing the same character he did in The Mood for Love. This is meant to be set like 3 or 4 years later, and now he's resulted into a bit of a kind of a playboy kind of, character. He's got a mustache, he wears suits, he's very rich, he's kind of taken his passion of love for kind of, news writing, and done these kind of like strips, and he's kind of making a lot of money on the side. He's got a very easy and fun, quick, fast-paced, moving life where he's spending large, gambling, drinking, womanizing, writing some kind of trashy kind of stories for the 60s kind of newspapers, and he's selling them, making a bit of easy money, and that's his kind of routine, that's his kind of life now. And he's kind of, the events of the past have kind of led him to this point, through his relationship that didn't actually come to be, or didn't happen, from Maggie Chung in the Mood for Love. He's resorted to this character now, and he doesn't want to get himself into that place again. And this is very apparent with a lot of the women and kind of interactions he has with these women characters. Each one is very different, very well defined, offers something very specific to him and his kind of relationship, whether it's a physical relationship, whether it's a more of an intellectual relationship, whether it's more of a curiosity and an intrigue, and to a low point in his life. He comes across, I'd say, at least 3 or 4 different women in the film, and he's fascinated with all 4 of them, but he never lets himself get to a point where he feels something again. There's a great line similar to callback to In the Mood for Love, where feelings creep up on you, and when he starts to feel something, he kind of has to stop himself or close himself off or become a bit of an asshole. It kind of results to a character similar to Days of Being Wild, the kind of character in that one is played by Leslie Chung, who is someone who's using women for his own needs and then discarding them, almost like a punishment towards women for how he is grow up and how he's kind of been presented and objectified by a woman who is not his mom. And similar to this, he's doing the exact same thing. He just sees them as objects and has their fun and has their way, but he's extremely charming, extremely funny, and obviously has his kind of specific type of dialogue. He's a very nice person still. He does resort back to his old ways in moments, in vulnerable moments throughout the film, but in the core, his new personality and who he is, it's a front. It's someone who doesn't want to be in that vulnerable situation again, and honestly has never let go of really that connection. He never feels like he can really earn that back. And what he does, he writes a sci-fi novel called 2046, and this is where the opening of the film comes in. This is where we get pretty interesting kind of sequences throughout the films of this sci-fi world of the world of 2046, where this train is going endlessly and doesn't go anywhere, and kind of goes on for hours, days, months, years. And these characters are on this train, and it's a story about a 1960s kind of man writing about the future and his perspective. This is his imagination, his kind of viewpoint, and he's putting himself almost in the characters that were presented into that futuristic world, and he kind of writes in some of the women characters that he comes across, and he puts himself into these stories as much as the stories he's coming across as well. So it's part original, part kind of his own experience, his own kind of reflection. The opening of the film is a callback to In the Mood for Love and what he did at the Buddhist temple ceremony in terms of the rock. And this is shown in a very artistic, very kind of sci-fi kind of expressionistic way through the opening sequence, which if you don't watch In the Mood for Love, we didn't get that, you would miss that straight away, but it's definitely in there. The Japanese character that he kind of sees himself in the future sci-fi world is a version of himself that he's interacting with some of the women characters, which is androids, and he's putting himself in scenarios where he feels like all the lost memories, all these lost feelings and expression that he can never get back and never reclaim, or goes nowhere, or is just kind of just there. These feelings he has all in this kind of sci-fi script called 2046. So you get partial of the film is a sci-fi world, partially is mostly set within 1960s kind of Hong Kong, where he kind of has these different types of relationships with different women, different reminders and constant references to In the Mood for Love, almost like a shadow, almost like an echo of, you know, a former life, a former kind of version of himself, you know, a placement at a time. It's even the tagline for this film is, "Are you still in the mood for love?" Because that's what the film is ultimately about. It's a character that is haunted by his past and by his past relationships and decision making, and never wants to talk about it, never wants to really kind of acknowledge it, and won't let himself be placed in that situation again. He felt very strongly, very passionate about that woman, and he knows it's gone. Maggie Cheung is a cameo in the film, only appearing in certain kind of, not flashbacks, but recreations of In the Moments in the Mood for Love, or even just in the apartment, the hotel, the 2046. We get to see kind of moments of her. She's never come back. There's never a reunion or a conclusion to that kind of, you know, these two characters. It's, you know, she is a past figure, even though she still wears the same clothes and same hairstyle. That's how he remembers her, that's how he sees her. He hasn't seen her since then, and he hasn't interacted with her since then, but yet those feelings are still longing, and that is fucking brilliant. And it's really daring, it's really kind of risky for a film to kind of do that. It's not a traditional kind of happy, you know, American based kind of movie where everything works out by the end. It's very matter of fact. The supporting cast in the film and the women characters that were introduced in the film are absolutely brilliant. They are gorgeous, they are well performed, they have very rich, defined characters. A lot of them are kind of, you know, comeback returning actors from previous films, which is brilliant. We have our kind of the main relationship he has throughout a good portion of the film, which is the neighbour who lives in 2046. He lives in 2047, and again, it's this idea of, you know, does the numbers mean something to you? Is the hotel calls him In the Mood for Love? But he's fascinated with that room number, he's fascinated with that kind of the person behind that room number as well. He has a very kind of physical relationship. Brilliant performance by that actress as well, and really have an interesting kind of back and forth kind of chemistry and back and forth line dialogue. And he sees that, he recognises it, but yeah, he does it in a very charming, very nice way. He's still an asshole in places, but he does it in his own kind of way, which fits to his character. Even when that character comes back towards the second and third act of the film, you know, he's still very friendly, still very supportive, he's still very helpful to her, and he can never be with her. He can never feel like he can offer anything to that. He doesn't want to put himself in that position again. He comes across a few different women throughout the film. There's the kind of neighbour he has, with, you know, who he's renting from, who is falling in love with a Japanese man. You know, the guy himself, the father, doesn't approve of Japanese people because of the war and basically what's happened, and she is kind of sad, she's down, she's a writer herself, she's a book reader, and she gets lost in this world of 2046, and she's one of the main characters within that kind of sci-fi novel. He has an intellectual kind of relationship with her, and very much spends a lot of time with her, and recognises that she is in love with this man, and, you know, tries to coach her and help her into kind of either letting go or accepting it or embracing it. And he kind of through his actions and through his assistant with helping with the letters coming through, or helping with some of the stories that she kind of ghost writes, kind of gets her to a point where, like, don't make the same mistake I did. It's if you love him, if you want to be with him, if you want to marry him, then go for it. You know, nothing's stopping you. You know, and he surprised by that. There's a caution where she does leave. She does go to be with him in Japan, and he's kind of like, wow, that happened. It kind of just, you know, again, it kind of surprised him. And even when he goes back home to Singapore, where he kind of worked for a little bit during the kind of In the Mood for Love, he meets across another woman, a gambler, very much on a low point, and played by Gong Wong, who is known as the Black Widow, and someone who has a black glove. And it's a fascination with her, in fact that she has the same name as Maggie Cheung's character in the last movie. And, you know, once again, it's not a physical relationship, it's not an intellectual relationship, it's more like a reminder, a kind of a ghost of someone he former loved and someone he cared about. And again, he's fascinated, he's tempted, but he can never be with that person. He kind of brings back memories, bring back lost memories, and he has to kind of walk away from that. The deleted scenes actually on the Blu-ray edition actually show that character coming back, which I think is quite fascinating. Adds a little bit extra to that kind of character arc. But you know, some of these characters are very kind of brief. Some have a very brief kind of moment in his life, and he kind of moves on, and some come back only to kind of move on again. And this is his life. This is his acceptance. This is his penance, self-torture, self-loathing, whatever you want to say. You know, Tony Leung's character gives a really brilliant performance in the film, alongside all the supporting cast members, all the women characters. You know, really well defined, really ambitious with the sci-fi world, and the kind of the music choices are very different this time around. Love the 60s environment, and this is a very Stanley Kubrick, very much a magnum opus send-off closing chapter of 8 movies up to this point. So overall, and bottom line, 2046 is a beautiful send-off and a fantastic conclusion to his kind of 10-year plus journey within Hong Kong cinema. This was a very defining kind of chapter in his kind of filmography. It feels like he's wrapped up a lot of loose ends in a very different type of way, not in a more traditional way, but more they bringing back characters, bringing back kind of, you know, talking points about kind of love and expression and emotion and moments and vulnerability, loneliness, kind of dealing with grief, dealing with past loss, dealing with lost memories, creativity, a lot of different kind of keywords that pop into my mind when I think of this film, and his last couple of movies especially. I think this is definitely his, close to his Stanley Kubrick 2001 Space Odyssey that we're going to get. I think it's very ambitious. I think it works a lot more compared to Ashes of Time was, and I think it's a really good closing chapter to his reign of movies up to that point. And I absolutely love this film. I think it's absolutely brilliant. Definitely one of my favourite Wong Kar-Wai movies. Absolutely recommend watching this one for sure. I'd love to know your thoughts and opinions, guys. Please comment down below. What are your thoughts on 2046? Did this one work for you? Did this one miss the mark? Have you seen every other movie he's done leading up to this point? I'd love to know your thoughts and opinions, guys. Please comment down below. So in the meantime, I'm for reviews. Something like that.